Well, here we are. Good morning to you. A happy Monday, unless it's not Monday where you are, which could be the case depending how successful you are at the whole time travel thing. Or if you're watching this, I suppose, on time delay later, like you're catching it when it's not live. In case that is your situation, happy day, whatever it is. Today, we're talking about the top 10 He Man action figures of all time. And I'm really curious where you're going to rest on this. I've got my opinions, but it's not just me telling you my top 10 He Man action figures. We're going to go through 4 different sites. We're going to see what they think, how they rank them. And then we're going to compare and contrast the sites and see if they get them right or wrong. And I think it's these sites, I haven't looked at the list, but I think it's mainly the vintage series. So could be more. Are you ready to dive into this? Are you excited for this discussion? Don't you just love top 10 lists? I'll give you a second to process that. All right, here we go. The definitive top 10 He-Man action figures. So we're going to start with, there's probably going to be a crap ton of pop-ups. Let's see how this works. So we're going to start with CBR and their top 10 list of He-Man action figures. In no particular order for them. So they have Man-E-Faces as their number 10. Was this a figure that you guys really enjoyed to play with? Hey, Silver Knight Kyle, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. I'm going to jump back and forth between the browser window and this. So if I miss your comment, apologize. I'm going to come back and forth as I can. Man-E-Faces. I like him more now as an adult collector than I did playing with him as a figure. It wasn't a feature that I ever really incorporated into play. He was a cool figure. I like that he had a bigger upper body strength, but I always just considered him a robot because he was changing his face so much. They have Man-E-Faces at number 10. Now, Snout Spout is number 9 for them, and they're saying he's the single coolest fireman ever. Who doesn't love a robot that shoots water out of the nose? That's also an elephant, right? It kind of goes hand in hand. Hey, John, you also love Man-E-Faces as a kid as well. And I'm going to call it right now. With these two examples, I think they're going, in this list at least, I think they're going for best action figure gimmick and play feature, not necessarily the best figure. We'll see if that's a trend that continues all the way through this. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Again, sound off if you have a top 5 or a top figure, or if you have a special memory with anything that we connect to. I'm happy to share it. I like what I like about Snout Spout is we got to see his entire design while making Power of Grayskull. Basically, every iteration of how that figure came to be, the different pump mechanisms that went into creating it, the suction. It was originally going to be a pump on the top, like Cobra Khan, and then they went to like a vacuum pump kind of on the back, which is a little bit different. It was a really interesting kind of cross section of the design process, how that went back and forth. So that was really cool to see. If you haven't seen Power of Grayskull as well, it should be available on Tubi in your area, tubi.com, search Power of Grayskull. And on my channel here, I have been releasing behind the scenes snippets. There's 2 of the 3 have been released already. I think the next and last part is next Saturday night at 8 p.m. They're just 10-minute bursts of kind of how the documentary came to be, some behind the scenes stuff, filming with different people, and hearing from the crew themselves, including myself. So Snout Spout at number 9 on this list. Horde Trooper. The image has not loaded for this guy here. Did you guys like the Horde Trooper? I always felt that he was a bit wobbly to stand up, and he came out very late in the figure run as well. He had that almost collapsible button in the middle that he kind of just falls apart if you were to hit it. And if that button and that gimmick went, it's very hard to stand up. So I didn't like the design in that. But I love the fact that it was kind of a army builder when there wasn't too many army builders in the Masters Universe line, right? Can you think of any army builders? I'll leave it with you. Orko. I'm very surprised to see Orko on this list already, because it's not a fantastic action figure, in my opinion. I think the likeness is pretty good, but it had that little road ripper, cord that you pull out. And yeah, it basically had the top that spun on the bottom. So you never really sat perfect because of it. He had to be able to teeter. He's almost like a dreidel, right? He would spin and bobble around a bit. Even they say here, Orko sets himself apart from other Masters Universe divines with a radically different visual design. There's no muscular Hulk or robotic half something other. Orko was a small floating magical wizard who aided He-Man on his adventures. His gimmick and he was cool. The ripcord through his body, sending him flying across the surface like a kitchen table at absolutely inopportune times. He was very hard to play with. You almost had to just play with him as a sidekick, right? John's even saying Orko was not a good figure. I love that it was a different sculpt than the standard, wrestling kind of guy, barbarian thing that, as they mentioned, but he's very hard to play, and he was very big too, right? The show, he would have been like kind of the size of He-Man's head if you were going to compare him to another action figure, but he's like the size of the upper torso. They got to give you value, I suppose, but it was just, I don't know. Duke Sir is chiming in as well. Orko is an ugly toy, but a great cartoon character. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he belongs on this list. So there's our first one that we can kind of completely disagree with. Roboto. Again, see, this list is for me. They're trying to find like the gimmicks, the actual play features for the figures. What do they say about Roboto? This is CBR again, CBR.com. I think it's comicbookreader.com. Roboto's basic deal is, well, he's a robot. This is pretty cool, especially because he had functioning gears. Kids could twist his waist, which would then set off the big multicolored plastic gears in his chest. Functionality was everything for He-Man toys, and so was something now known as the toyetic quality. Did it lend itself to being a toy? Could a kid play with it? That's a feature that's virtually gone from modern toys, which tend to be hyper realistic. Did you guys like Roboto? I felt that he was kind of lackluster as an action figure. Yeah, there was a gimmick in it with these gears, but it didn't help the playability. Like those gears turning as his body turned didn't tip the fate of the battle for anybody. He was just a robot. He didn't come apart like a robot. At least he wasn't supposed to. And I never really liked this visor thing that he had here. I thought the head design was probably the weakest of the whole mix. There wasn't quite enough going on. It reminds me a little bit of Stondar as well. Oh gosh, I hope we get to those rock characters. Mekaneck. All right. Did you like Mekaneck as a kid? The trees on Eternia must be pretty tall. Even so, having a neck that can extend a foot or more off the neck of the warrior comes in pretty handy when fighting against Skeletor and company. Don't just stick it out too far. Did you guys like Mekaneck? Duke's chiming in, sir. I liked Roboto because he looked cool. So you liked the look of Roboto. I did not. Mekaneck, on the other hand, I thought looked like a better, cooler robot, and he had a robotic-like neck feature. It seemed to make him a bigger target, and that was like his big superpower masters thing, but I don't know. I've grown to like this figure later on, especially with the armor and the mace. Again, as an adult collector, he seems much cooler than some of the other figures looking back on it. Silver Knight, Kyle's chiming in. Toyetic sounds like they're influenced by wrestlers Matt Cardona and Brian Myers. Toyetic is a term that George Lucas and the Kenner folks coined, from what I understand, from the 70s. What's the toyetic property? Is it toy-ish? Like, how does this thing become worthy of being a toy? How do you play with it? How does looking at it instantly conjure images of play in your mind? That's toyetic. So that's where I'm pretty sure it comes from. But Matt and Brian are huge toy fans too, right? So Mekaneck, number 5, again, super gimmicky list so far. Trapjaw. Okay, now we're getting into definitely good figures. Look, this is number 4 on their list. Often a Masters Universe figures would be just what it said on the box, and that is absolutely true of Trapjaw. Trapjaw was a villain from 83 with a lower steel jaw that was articulate and a robotic arm that could be swapped out for various nefarious implements. His awesome design was very 80s neon color scheme and made him an instant favorite, and he remains consistently an instant go for any new He-Man action figure lines. This is definitely a cool figure. Certainly in my top 10, I really love his belt. There's like that, WWF wrestling kind of feel with that big belt. And they don't have a backstory or anything to it, but he kind of just reminds me of a bit of a pirate. And so the fact that he has a skull and crossbones on his belt, just kind of really adds to the whole thing. And the swappable robotic arms is cool, but like, where do you keep all that stuff when you're playing with them? And then the little zipline hook thing on the top of his head. It's never explained. They show it to you, I think, in a commercial, but it was very hard to implement that hook thing when you're playing. Amazing figure, though. Strong figure to come out of the gate with as well. Did you guys have any cool memories of Trapjaw? John saying Trapjaw belongs on this list for sure. I agree. He's got a hook hand too, like every good pirate. Did I tell you guys my theory about the evil warriors and their inspiration? So I've always felt that they take their cues from the classic Universal monster movies. Okay. So you've got Skeletor, which kind of represents the mummy. You've got Trapjaw, which is very much like Frankenstein. Merman is the creature from the Black Lagoon. Beastman's like the Wolf Man. So you have all these archetypal villains that kind of draw upon, other things in not only in mythology but in media, so that when you see them together, it forms a cohesion, a cohesive whole in your mind that you're already exposed to and used to. Let's keep going on with the list. Scareglow, number 3. So this is kind of a deep cut for somebody to try to be super cool here, I think. So Skeletor was scary enough, as will become apparent, but Mattel wasn't content with that. They had turned him into a ghost. The Scareglow figure debuted near the end of the original run in 87 and featured 2 action figures. One was a pretty standard action figure feature with turning away, and then figure snaps back at the punch, and then the second was the glow-in-the-dark design. So they're trying to say that this was Skeletor as a ghost, but we know the story behind that is not the case. It's just a ghost that works with Skeletor, not the ghost of Skeletor, but another henchman. And there are many YouTube videos out there if you want to go verify what the packaging says when it says evil ghost to Skeletor. I don't mind the idea that it's actually Skeletor and Skeletor's ghost, but that apparently is not the case by any stretch. Again, this is a deep cut figure. Scareglow has almost become like the Boba Fett of Masters of the Universe, where like he's this cool like figure that everybody likes, where there wasn't a lot on him. It was a late run kind of edition where he glows in the dark, which is, kind of like the last hurrah. So it's either something that lights up, something that glows in the dark, or something that has vac metal on them so that it's super shiny. Those are always kind of like the last run figures, I find, when it comes to almost any toy line. In fact, it can be the principal defining thing of the toy line sometimes. But if it wasn't part of that, when the toy line that you like starts doing those kind of figures, they're probably they're going to be wrapping up for sure. John saying Mosquito is kind of like a Dracula character. I can see that. So Scareglow has become, I think, over popularized for no real reason. He wasn't a massive presence in anything. He was just a figure, had a mini comic. They put him in Masters Universe Revelation. He's in Revolution by the looks of the new trailer. I get why he's popular. He's a glow-in-the-dark skeleton. Awesome. But there's no awesome Filmation cartoon with him. He wasn't in the Masters Universe live-action movie. So it's just developed its own cult following over the years, and I think that's fine. But then when you take that and you try to make it cool and shove it into, the fan's face, it kind of brings the value down. It's not as fun. And that's exactly what Star Wars has done with Boba Fett. He used to be this mysterious bounty hunter where you didn't know too much about him. And then all of a sudden, he's everywhere. He's the main character and stuff. And it just dilutes the value of what the imagination can do on its own. All right. Number 2. So He-Man. So this is interesting that He-Man's being put on this list because we thought that this would be a gimmick-heavy list. And clearly, I think they're just going to do He-Man and Skeletor for number 2, number 1, because how can you have, a list on the best action figures without the main character? So should we skip ahead? Yeah. So it's He-Man and Skeletor. What are they saying about He-Man to justify it? Twist Waist Power Punch. The Muscle Bound figure was inspired by Conan, inspired She-Ra. Yeah. So they're not really saying anything. There are a few cooler villains. The hero's only good as his villain. There are a few cooler villains than Skeletor. Filmation cartoon made him a little less scary. Anyone picking up this action figure might think differently if you looked at it alone. So that's this list. What do you guys think overall of that list? Not too blown away with it. Very gimmick heavy. And then it's like, well, we got to put the staples in there in the end. Let's see what we can find on our next list here. And I apologize for all the ads. It is Cyber Monday, but people got to advertise and make money. Hey, Tater's here. He's saying too many He-Mans in the lines. Yes, every line has too many He-Mans as well. They looks like these lists that we're drawing from today are largely looking at vintage stuff. So let's take a look at the next one. So this is coming from Enougha.com. Top 10 things, He-Man action figures. Let's see what they kind of go to. King Hiss. So right away, we have a different figure here. This is a gimmicky figure as well. The leader of the Snake Men. The Snake Men are an interesting kind of subsection as well. They weren't really part of the cartoon. Tung Lashor was in the cartoon, was it? Yeah, he was part of the Horde. So they didn't bring King Hiss into the cartoon, and it's like they didn't really get much promotion, but they were cool looking figures, part of an awesome, heavy, popular brand. So it worked well enough to sell them, and you could have your own adventures with them without having the ancillary media. And I love them. It's also super ripe for any new media that wants to take advantage of this. So what do they say about King Hiss? This absurdly over-the-top figure was like He-Man meets Transformers, which also doesn't surprise me. And the leader of the Snake Men, or whatever they were called, King Hiss looked like a human wearing snake armor, but pop off his torso coverings, and he's literally a gosh darn snake. His actual upper body was comprised entirely of snakes. Oddly, his legs were still humanoid, though. Creepy enough to unnerve even his fellow bad guys. I spent much time transforming this guy from man to Snake Man, and it was fairly ingenious gimmick. What did you guys think of King Hiss? Did you have him? Is that a figure that you would love to get your hands on if you didn't? Of course, the vintage one is pretty pricey. Some of the other iterations of King Hiss have been pretty popular through years. Classics is a great example of King Hiss. But it's not a figure that I think you need in a top 10. Number 9, Faker. I love this already. On paper, this has to be the stupidest toy ever. An evil robot that's supposed to be a dead ringer for He-Man, except he has skin blue, Skeletor-style armor, and a visible tape recorder in his chest, courtesy of a sticker. The idea that Skeletor built this droid to infiltrate the good guy lair and pimp He-Man's friends for information. Skeletor must think Team He-Man are either legally blind or just absolutely blank morons. Who would fall for this trap? Did you guys like Faker? For some reason, I like Faker. I don't think he belongs on a list. I love the doppelganger stuff, though. Absolutely, I do. Not a top 10 figure, though. Merman and Stinkor. So if you didn't know, these are the same figure. Look, one is just painted black and white, and the other one is teal green. Stinkor came out after, and of course, Stinkor stinks because they infuse patchouli oil in the plastic, and he has Mechanex armor as well, but he has his own unique shield, from what I understand. Again, why are there 2 figures on this list? I don't understand. Modulok number 7. Okay, here's an interesting figure that is worthy of being on the list because you could mix and match and play with it. But what happens when you lose one too many legs? What happens when you don't know how to put something together? And by the way, some of these pieces are rather sharp. You should see the classics and the origins stuff for some of the figures that they made. Some of the sharp edges and all this, not just Modulok, but some of the sharp edges are really dangerous for kids to play with, and I don't think they consider that all the time. Let's go on with the list. They're saying Skeletor again. Yeah, I mean, he's a good character. Should be on a list, but I don't know if he's a Stratos. Okay. Whoever is making this list is absolutely drunk. What makes this figure good? He looks like, a flying hairy. Look at all the detail on the hairy chest that they gave him. Is he supposed to be like a flying monkey here? I love all the feather details and stuff, but this is not a figure that I would put on the list at all. It's just not something for me. Man-E-Face is number 4, so that's a trend that we've seen. So Skeletor and Man-E-Faces have crossed over on these lists. Trapjaw as well as number 3. Beastman. Yeah, no, this guy's out to lunch. And then they have He-Man as number 1. Okay, again, they are just doing everything that they can to get you to pay attention. So we can clarify now that we have 2 more lists that we're going to go to. And I guarantee based on this, we see Trapjaw, He-Man, and Skeletor, and maybe Man-E-Faces. All right, so that's almost half the lists that have crossed over between those 2 and this next one. What figure has been left off so far that you think is worthy of top 10 He-Man action figures? Mosquito came up in our chat talking about something else. I think Mosquito is a really unique figure because it has a cool gimmick that really pertains to the figure where you can drink the blood and has like the blood vacuum that recycles, but it's also a little different build and sculpt. I'm surprised Sorceress hasn't been mentioned yet. The Sorceress is a cool figure, but maybe that's not cool enough. Whiplash, John is saying right now in the chat. Whiplash was a cool figure too. Again, will Stone Dar and Rockon make appearances? Will the Giants make appearances? Megator and Titus. Those were late runs. What about Laserlight, He-Man, and Skeletor? At least give me a version of He-Man and Skeletor that's more interesting than the stock, the staple. I get that those are staples and they started and everything kind of was added on top of that. So it feels by gimmick standards, not so much. But are those good action figures in their own right? I think maybe Skeletor just because it's a skeleton, but is that enough to make it a cool action figure? I don't know. I don't know. John's also saying Clawful could be good. Clawful. Trying to think. Evelyn, not bad. Evelyn could be one. Taxing my brain to think of all the different Masters of the Universe figures. What about Blade or Sarad? You know, if we're talking not only gimmicks, but cool looking figures. You know, Sarad had the sparks, Blade had the laser sword. I think those are good. I mean, Hordak. How come Hordak hasn't been on there? Let's keep going. Let's see what we find on list number 3. This is from Wheeljack's Lab, collectibles and vintage toys. All right. We're going to add that to the stage. Here we go. So let's see what they say. Again, I'm expecting He-Man, Skeletor, Man-E-Faces, and Trapjaw to make the list. Oh, look at this. Evil Lyn out of the gate. Like I said, how come there haven't been any women? Spectre Sorceress. Evil Lyn's on here. Awesome. Do they have a write-up? Mattel released Evil Lyn as part of the 83 second wave series. The action figure is the only member of the Evil Warriors as a female. Mattel created her for gender diversity or as a direct rival to Teela. The Evil Lyn action figure possesses the trademark twist, waist, and power punch that all figures do. The action figure came with a removable headdress, leotard, boots, and a short light blue wand slash staff, and a mini comic. They have Merman as number 9. Again, kind of a cool figure. Maybe top 20, but not top 10. I just don't get it. What's their rationale here? Released Merman 81 as part of the first series. Figure came with a sword replica and removable chest armor. I do like the sword because it is that coral look, and I do like the armor. That is unique. The Merman character, both in the mini comic and animated series, was a prominent member of the Evil Warriors and close to the leader Skeletor. Merman was the ruler of all creatures that live beneath the oceans and seas of Eternia, including his tribe of the amphibious humanoid race. Even his high rank amongst the people did not deter him from being Skeletor's loyal lieutenant. Then they move on to Beastman. So that's 2 lists for Beastman out of 3. Again, I don't get it. I'm not sure. So here we go. Man-E-Faces number 7. There's nothing that they say about Beastman to justify that there. Man-E-Faces, again, some editions of Man-E-Faces came with an extra pack of weapons, and it's referred to collectively as Man-E-Weapons. If you can find that, that will be good. By the way, Wheeljack's Lab sells a ton of stuff on eBay. Their stuff I find is a little highly priced, but it is what it is. Okay, so they're including Battle Bones in here. This is not something that I would include in any top 10, 20, or 50 list. I love the art for Battle Bones, but this is a troop transport, right? And this is a really great gimmick by toy companies to say, hey, get this, but in order to really kind of play with it, you've got to have enough figures to go in each side. So you basically have to, it's a thing you buy in order to buy more figures, right? And, you know, for the first time, for whatever reason, I'm just looking at the head of this, and it's awful similar to the Slime Pit head as well. I wonder if they used the same mold and then made some adjustments. Battle Cat. Yes, Battle Cat is a figure. How come Battle Cat and or Panther weren't mentioned? Of the two, Battle Cat totally belongs on this list. Taking that armor off and putting the helmet on. I can't tell you how many times, not just with He-Man, but with other characters that would ride Battle Cat. It was an essential playtime thing for me, and there's just something so present about Battle Cat as a figure. So this is probably the first one that I truly agree with that had been left off to now. Teela. I had Teela as a kid. I really liked playing with her, but I don't know that I like her enough to put her in the list. I love the design. I love the outfit. I love the paint apps that they have on her. I love that you can put the snake headdress on and take it off. Again, top 20, 100%. Top 15, probably. Top 10, no. Man-at-Arms. Okay. Again, another figure that didn't have a lot going for it, but the weapons, the armor, the look, the style, this is a fun figure to play with. It's just a little bit more than He-Man. That armor alone and the design just makes it feel like it's part of its own show, where He-Man can be a barbarian in any kind of sword and sorcery or sword and sandal line. This feels different, and that's why I really like Man-at-Arms as a figure. Number 2, Skeletor. Number 1, He-Man. Okay, we've been that before. So, but no Trapjaw. Did we really lose Trapjaw here from this list? I'm going back to find out here. Man-E-Faces. Yeah. No Trapjaw. They did not put Trapjaw on their list. So that really, really surprises me that Trapjaw was left off the list in favor of Merman, Evelyn, or Tila. Really interesting. Okay, so we're going to go to the last list now. This one comes from Battle Ram. So if you're a He-Man fan, chances are, and you've gone down the rabbit hole of the interweb, chances are you've discovered Battle Ram. They were a great resource for us when we were researching Power of Grayskull. John saying that last one was a bogus list. Sorry, Wheeljack's Lab. Bogus list is what you get dubbed. But Battle Ram blog is a great fandom site that has tons of information. Let's take a look here. So, and this is somebody's personal top 10 list. So here we go. Ram Man. Yeah, we'll accept all these. Ram Man. Really? Favorite figure? Is Ram Man is right on there. Did you guys like Ram Man? I feel like Ram Man was a figure that is very much along the lines of Orko. Stiff, can't play with. Why couldn't we have movable arms? I would rather have a figure that I make bounce on my own than a bouncing kind of gimmick in there. I get, like, that's the obvious thing to do. Let's put a spring in there and just have him go after, use that in playtime, go after the bad guys. That doesn't work for me. Give me a figure that can move, which is why when it came to Classics re-release, that's a figure that I was like, oh, I gotta get this because it's an actual figure of Ram Man. I'm skeptical now, but the rest of this list, I get that this is somebody's personal favorite thing and their list. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have our own list, but I don't know that that's on mine. Beastman. Okay, he's made 3 of the 4 lists so far, so maybe I'm missing something. Tila, 2 of the 4 lists, and there she is in a beautiful snake armor, which is awesome. Clawful. There you go, John. There you go. You were asking for Clawful. Right there. I love the oversized claw in the hand. That scepter is really nice when you can get it to fit in the other hand and when it doesn't fall out. And the armor is a nice touch. It really transforms the look of the figure without being over the top. And I love it when you could crack the shell and basically beat him. At least that's how I played with Clawful as a kid. So let's keep going. Merman makes the list again. I got to see what they're thinking about Merman. When we got the first 4 figures in our house in 82, I eagerly was looking for the other figures available line. The one that caught my eye the most was Merman. And while the figure itself was significantly different compared to its cross-sell artwork, I love the figure from the moment I got it. It remains probably my all-time figure to this day. Why is that? It's hard to quantify, but it has to do with his color and his head sculpt. I want to say I got him around the same time as Zora, but of course my childhood memory is a bit fuzzy. The head sculpt is the least interesting thing to me. Like these fins, like the Filmation, had the big fins to the side, and this kind of didn't feel like it. And I started getting the He-Man because of the cartoon, and then I went to the toys. So when they differed too much from the cartoon, it was off-putting. Stinkor, again, I know we just talked about this, right? Stinkor and Merman are the same build, but I like Stinkor better as a build because of the color scheme, the scent factor, the armor. It's just way cooler. He's just after all, he's just a cheap Merman repaint with Mechanics armor, like I said before. But then again, I love Merman, so maybe this is a way to count him twice. My memories of playing with Stinkor as a kid permanently etched in my brain. Probably has a lot to do with the smell. I guess when I was a kid, I would wake my mom up with Stinkor by putting him under her nose while she was sleeping. What an ingenious way to wake up your parents, right? They get you an action figure and then you use it against them. I love it. Absolutely. Surprised there's no Mossman on the list. We've seen repaints. Mossman is kind of another version of Beastman, right? Why don't we have that? John thinks this list is maybe the most legit. It's pretty good so far. Man-at-Arms. So there we go. Definitely Man-at-Arms. Like I said, what do they say about Man-at-Arms? Man-at-Arms was one of those first 4 characters that I had in the house. Like Beastman, there's a lot of fun to be had with just messing around with the various bits of armor. I agree. Like the shin armor and the arm armor, like the brace there and the front part. Oh, it's so good. I had a version very much like the one I'm on with the lighter green costume, red dots in the helmet, and a light blue belt. It doesn't get more core Motu than this guy. Leech. So here we go. We finally get a different evil horde member that hasn't been mentioned. And I love Leech. I don't love his section cut gimmicks to stick onto stuff. It was fun when you could hide him underneath a glass coffee table while you're playing and you had maybe something over the top of the table so you didn't know he was there and you could drop down and get people. But I love that he was a bulky guy, very heavy. And when I showed Leech to my son, he's like, oh, I don't know about this. He had a hard time seeing his eyes when you look at him because his face is so big. I said, yeah, well, just lick it. stick it to something. And he did. He's like, oh, that's cool. So he was completely sold on the gimmick and the play feature when it came to Leech. But I just like the bulky size of him compared to some of the other figures. I just thought it was good value. Whiplash, John, this guy is your man. Whiplash is cool. Again, I really like that he did a different head sculpt. He feels different in the torso section, and he had that tail. And I love being able to slap the tail back and tie up characters with it. That was fun for me. As I previously mentioned, I had a tough time between choosing Clawful and Whiplash's kid. Ultimately, I went with Clawful, but it could have gone either way. I remember getting the comic that came with Clawful, and it prominently featured Whiplash in the story. FOMO wasn't returned in '84, but I had it bad. I had to have that lizard guy with the tail. I remember spending a lot of time playing with Whiplash despite that. So I think it was either able to borrow one from a friend or get my own later. Rattler. Oh my God, this list is legit. So here's a Snake Man that has basically the same tail feature as Whiplash, but he has the head that shoots in and out. Again, look at that awesome belt. I don't know. Why do I like the belt so much? I really like the belts. Cobra Khan is also missed. I liked him a lot. I don't like the pumping head on Cobra Khan. I wish he had the fins too. But I do like, again, there was a Snake Man and he added to it. So Rattler, yes, this is a cool figure. Again, the fact that his head could come in and out was a huge plus for me. And again, it had that rubber tail and I really liked his colors. And I love these snake staffs. I love them. I was obsessed with the one for Tung Lashor. Oh, we got a memory here. My memory of getting Rattler is quite vivid. It was the last of our summer in Eastern Washington House before our big move across the mountains to Rainier, a more temperate part of the Pacific Northwest. We're taking a road trip to California before the move. I remember gravely weighing my options at a store along the way. I could get 2 toys, and I was determined that they had to be Snake Men. I was looking at getting Cobra Khan or perhaps a newly released King Hiss or Rattler. I don't remember seeing Tung Lashor at the time. After studying all 3 toys and their package intently, I concluded that King Hiss was a cool idea, but his hidden snake body wasn't all that great looking, so I went with the other 2 figures instead. Rattler had pretty fun action figure that his head popped out. The little rattle was a nice touch too. I appreciate the detailed scales all over his snake-like body. And that's his top 10. So again, going backwards from 1 to 10, Rattler, Whiplash, Leech, Man-at-Arms, Stinkor, Merman, Clawful, Teela, Beastman, Ram Man. I gotta say, this last list that we looked at was probably the most, fan-driven, fanboy, fan person kind of list because it didn't have He-Man or Skeletor in there, which were staples on the other list. I think were more kind of crowd pleasers. But I love the personality put in that Battle Ram list. I'm guessing I've convinced you with my enthusiasm that was your favorite. What other figures would be on my list that we didn't talk about? So we mentioned Hordak, Man-at-Arms, Trapjaw for sure. Blade, Sarad were cool figures. Sorceress. I like the battle armor He-Man and Skeletors better than the originals. It was just a little bit something extra. You could get the battle damage. It kind of played a little bit into it. It wasn't a big play feature, but it was just enough. It made He-Man look more like a knight compared to Barbarian, I guess. It just felt bigger. And I love Battle Cat, as I mentioned. So is that enough? So let's see if we can do it. So Sorceress, Battle Cat, Trapjaw, Battle Armor He-Man. I guess I'll only do one Battle Armor. So Battle Armor Skeletor I like kind of better. Sarad, Blade. I'd put Leech on that list. Leech was a good character. Megator was such a cool figure. I can't believe that he was a Masters Universe figure when I saw him. Just above and beyond. And 2 more. 2 more. And I'm sure as soon as we're done streaming, I'll come up with what those 2 more could be. I don't know. Let me know what you think. John's chiming in and says, yeah, that's what I would suggest too. If you're going to add He-Man and Skeletor, use one of the variations. So would it be a battle armor? Would it be Flying Fist He-Man? Would it be Laser Light He-Man? Would it be Dragon Blaster Skeletor? Would it be Terraclaw Skeletor? I like Terraclaw Skeletor a lot. I have him over here. It's one that we use often in our playtime. I kind of want to say Prince Adam, but there's not much to him. He's just my favorite character, so it feels like a weak addition to my top 10 figure list, right? Triclops. How come Triclops hasn't been on the list? That massive sword that he came with and his eyes, that was something I used a lot. So Triclops would be on the list, and that gives me one more slot I'm looking around to see if I can find any of my Masters figures that really fit the bill, and looking at all the artwork. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure. You know, I want to kind of hear what you guys think. What would be a really great figure given my list already? What would be the figure that I'm missing from my Masters of the Universe top 10 figures list? I want to hear yours too. Let me know in the comments. Of course, give this video a like, sub, all that fun stuff. Let me know what figure is missing from my list and what your top 10 figures are. Did I say Man-at-Arms? I can't remember. I'll try to write it in the comments as well, or in the show description, what they are once we get through this. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to try to be back tomorrow. Maybe it'll be a top 10 NES or Super Nintendo or RPGs or something like that, because this was fun doing that. And it was good to go back and forth. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.